Conformity. I didn't think much about the picnic when we were packing the car. It was one of those routine family things. Same park, same folding chairs, same conversations that looped back on themselves every few months. Conformity. I had learned how to move through them without friction, smile when expected, stay quiet when needed. My son sat in the backseat, headphones half on, watching something on my phone. He's not loud, never has been. Uniformity. The kind of kid who notices everything but asks about very little. That used to make things easier. Lately, it didn't. By the time we arrived, everyone was already settled. My mother had claimed the center of the table, as always. Conformity. My siblings spread around her like spokes. My oldest daughter helped carry the food without being asked. She moves differently than the rest of us, more direct, less willing to pretend something doesn't exist just because it's uncomfortable. I noticed it, but I didn't name it. At first, everything followed the usual rhythm. Plates passed around, someone joking too loudly. My mother commenting on small things, who brought what, who forgot something, who had gained or lost weight. Conformity, it was all familiar enough that you could almost ignore the edges. My son stayed close to me, eating quietly. No one really spoke to him. Not out of cruelty, at least not openly. Conformity, it was more like he didn't quite register as someone who needed to be included. I told myself it was fine, that he preferred it this way. Then my mother looked over, not directly at him, but past him, like he was part of the background. Next time, she said, adjusting her napkin, don't bring the kid. He doesn't even talk. What's the point? She said it lightly, almost as if it were helpful. For a second, nothing happened. No one laughed, no one objected either. Conformity. The conversation didn't continue, it just paused. Like everyone was waiting to see if it would pass on its own. I felt it land before I saw his reaction. He didn't say anything, just lowered his eyes to his plate, the smallest shift. Conformity. But it was enough, and I did what I always did in moments like that. Nothing. Not because I agreed, not because I didn't care, but because there's a kind of silence you inherit in families like this. Conformity, you learn early that pushing back doesn't fix things, it just rearranges the tension. So you wait for it to settle. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I could already feel the cost of speaking, the way it would ripple out. Conformity, change the tone of the day, marked me as difficult. I was still deciding. Then a chair scraped against the ground. It was loud enough to cut through whatever hesitation was left. My oldest daughter stood up, not abruptly, Conformity, but with a kind of deliberate control that made everyone look at her whether they wanted to or not. She didn't raise her voice. Say that again. That was it. No anger, no theatrics. Just a sentence placed carefully in the middle of the table. My mother blinked, clearly not expecting resistance, let alone from her. I didn't mean anything, she said, brushing it off with a small laugh. You know how I talk. My daughter didn't sit back down. No, she said, steady. Say it again, Dee. Exactly how you said it. The silence this time was different. It didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like something waiting to be acknowledged. I looked around the table. My siblings avoided eye contact. Someone shifted in their chair. The usual escape routes, jokes, distractions weren't working. My son hadn't moved. That's when my uncle, who had been quiet till now, set his cup down. Not loudly, just enough to be heard. That's enough, he said, not to my daughter, Conformity, but to my mother. It wasn't dramatic, no raised voice, no confrontation in the usual sense. But it carried weight in a way I hadn't seen before. He rarely stepped in. When he did, people listened. We don't speak about children like that, he added. Uniformity. Not here. It was simple, clear, no room to reinterpret. For the first time, my mother didn't have a quick response. She adjusted her posture, glanced around as if looking for someone to realign the moment for her. No one did. My daughter slowly pulled her chair back in and sat down. The movement was controlled, like she had already decided what needed to happen and wasn't interested in extending it. The conversation eventually resumed, but not in the same way. It was quieter, more careful, like everyone had become aware of something they'd been ignoring. I didn't say much after that, but I watched. My mother didn't look at my son again, not with that same dismissiveness. She spoke around him, 40, not through, and it wasn't warmth, but it wasn't erasure either, and that was new. When we were leaving, my son walked a little closer to me than usual, not clinging, just present. Did I do something wrong? He asked quietly, eyes still forward. Conformity. The question sat heavier than anything that had happened at the table. No, I said. He nodded like he wanted to believe it but wasn't fully convinced. My daughter overheard. She didn't interrupt, didn't make it a moment. Conformity. Just reached over and squeezed his shoulder once before heading ahead to the car. It was small, but it stayed. On the drive home, I kept thinking about how quickly things had shifted and how long they had stayed the same before that. I had always told myself I was keeping the peace, that not every comment deserved a response. that family dynamics were complicated, and sometimes silence was the only way through. Maybe that was true. Formity. But silence had also made certain things easy to repeat. That day didn't fix anything completely. There were no apologies waiting in my inbox, no follow-up calls to clear the air, but something had been interrupted. Not loudly, not permanently. Formity. Just enough that it couldn't continue in exactly the same way again. And for the first time, I wasn't the one who let it pass.